Ladies and gentlemen, friends and family, distinguished guests, greetings from the Wareham Veteran Council and friends of the Wareham Veterans Council. It is with much admiration, celebration, and commemoration that we gather together today. Today we muster, we march, and we mesh, united as friends and united as family. Today we are rallying, reflecting, and remembering as a community and as citizens of the United States of America that we stand together for those who stood for us. Those brave hearts, those gladiators, those super soldiers, the world's best of the best, the brightest and bravest of all soldiers, sailors, airmen, Coast Guard, and Marines, our symbols of devoted duty, passionate patriotism, and selfless service. This week and forever, we fervently and passionately honor the 58,300 souls, lives, and heroic names of the phenomenal people that are forever etched on the walls in Washington and forever etched on the walls in our hearts. As the brochure declares, always remembered, never forgotten. If you will now stand with me for the posting of colors by the United States Air Force 102nd Intelligent Wing, ushered forward by Wareham resident and Marine bagpiper Peter Gordon. If you would please remain standing at the playing of the national anthem, and as you look high in the sky, you will be part of the highest of all tributes, a UX-60 Black Hawk helicopter flyover. This is the quintessential salute to our triumphant troops in honor of our fallen and in honor of our faithful. Great people of this great nation, singing the national anthem, Miss Grace Morrison.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Ladies and gentlemen, now the Pledge of Allegiance by Wareham High School senior Madison Hoff.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing for the invocation by Massachusetts State Chaplain, Chaplain Colonel Larry Baser.
Let's first take a moment of silent prayer, personal thought. And as you do so, remember all the fallen heroes from the Vietnam War. Afterwards, I encourage you, especially if you did not know someone who fell, or if you did, to go over to the wall, to touch a name, to say that name aloud. That name, that person, that soul will become alive again and will be remembered for good and for love. A moment of silent prayer. Eternal, compassionate God, creator of all, we lift our hearts to you as we gather here today in Wareham to remember the 58,315 men and women's names etched with love on this Vietnam Veterans Memorial moving wall. Standing together as one American family, we give honor to their memories who rendered their full measure of devotion in Southeast Asia. This solemn hour evokes tender and sacred memories for so many. With humility and reverence, we recall the countless brave souls who answered their country's call to duty. They fought valiantly and courageously in storms of fire and blood, so that we, the living, may enjoy the blessings of liberty, democracy, and freedom. May all the deeds of our fallen heroes of the United States Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Coast Guard be inspirations to us as we look upon their names on this sacred wall. Grant that their supreme sacrifice shall not have been in vain, just as the actual wall in our nation's capital has become a place of healing, so too let this wall help soothe and heal our weary souls. May this wall stimulate us to mindful of our responsibilities as duties as conscientious citizens of our commonwealth and this great republic. Help our nation, O Lord, to banish the dark forces of iniquity, oppression, and violence. Endow us with strength to create a just world where the banner of freedom will wave over all your children of the world. Amen. And amen.
Like fireworks on the 4th of July, lighting up the sky, reminding us that we are in the land of the free and the home of the brave. A round of applause for the Black Hawk pilot who just lit up the sky in salute of our freedom fighters and the price they pay for our freedom. Also joined in radiant display and salute to our loved ones, raising the banners of liberty in honor of the moving wall's names of greatness. Join me in another round of applause for the parade of colored participants, the Wareham Police Department Honor Guard. Ladies and gentlemen, you may be seated. And we'd also like to recognize the Board of Selectmen, Alan Slavin, who is also here with us today. Thank you. The Vietnam Veterans Wall. The moving wall, as you see to your rear, was the idea of 3 Californian veterans, John Devitt, Jerry Javier, and Norris Shears. They had the idea, and it was completed in 1984, and the names represented are from 1959 to 1975. I stand before you as the son of a father who served in combat during Vietnam in 1965 to 1968. He was stationed in Okinawa as a generator section chief working with the Night Hercules missile system. There has never been a day in my life that I didn't recognize the importance of days like this because of the leadership of my father. It is the war of my early childhood. The dates I gave you, 1959 to 1975, I was born in 1971. And many of you understand that if you are in that era, it is the war of your childhood as well, even if you may have never served. The words of President Theodore Roosevelt seemed appropriate today. It is not the critic who counts. It is not the man who points out how the strong man stumbled or where the doer of deeds could have done better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust, sweat, and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs and comes up short again and again, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, and spends himself in a worthy cause, who at best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat. Vietnam veterans made up of 10% of their generation. 3,403,100 personnel served in Southeast Asia and the theater that included Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, flight crews that were based in Thailand, and sailors in adjacent south side of Chinese sea waters. 514,300 were offshore. 2,059,000 personnel served within the borders of South Vietnam from January 1965 to March 1973. Another 50,000 men served in Vietnam between 1960 and 1964. And of the 2.6 million, between 1 and 1.6 million, about 40 to 60% either fought in combat, provided close support, or were at least fairly regularly exposed to enemy attack. 7,484 were women. Women of whom 83.5% of them were nurses. Peak strength grew $554,000. That was in April of 1968. And for casualties, hostile deaths, 47,378. Non-hostile deaths, 10,800. Total, 58,300. Married men killed, 17,539. 61% of the men killed were 21 years of age or younger. Wounded, 303,704. Severely disabled, 75,000. Missing in action, 2,338. POWs, 766. 114 died in captivity. As you think those numbers through, the families affected and the loss of family members represented in these numbers, today, we are here to remember that all gave some and some gave all. Ladies and gentlemen, the moving wall. I would like now to introduce to you someone who is truly a hometown hero, what many would describe as an officer and a gentleman. He's a pillar in the community and a mentor to all. Our first speaker, Stevie Baptiste. Stevie Baptiste, on the 4th of September 1956, 2 days after his 17th birthday, he arrived in Fort Dix, New Jersey, for his first 8 weeks of basic training. Raise your hand if you remember basic training. Some things you never forget, right? After completion at Fort Dix, he arrived at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, home of the infamous 82nd Airborne. Airborne is as they would shout it out, right? Soldier Baptiste soon became part of the elite paratrooper airborne division. He spent most of his service time in Germany. And just after being in the military for only 9.5 months, not only was he part of the airborne, he was so outstanding and proficient, he was selected to be an instructor at jump school. And he began training jumpers out of the 11th Airborne Division, 8th Infantry Advanced Paratrooper School. And not only is he a man that can fly high in the sky, but here on the ground, he is a man of high achievement. He is an entrepreneur, a philanthropist, and successful businessman. As a community role model, he is the proud owner of the world-renowned Pier View restaurant. He said he learned many of his successful work ethic and healthy communication skills in those formidable military years. In those active duty years of service, he achieved the rank of Specialist First Class and Qualified Jump Instructor. Each year, he hosts the All-Airborne Reunion, hosting up to 150 people from throughout the United States with ample food, entertainment, and reminiscences of past duty. His greatness in uniform and excellence to community service has recognized him and was selected and served as Grand Marshal of the 2014 Veterans Day Parade. Ladies and gentlemen, I proudly present to you ONSA's finest, former Grand Marshal Stevie Baptiste.
Thank you, Major. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming to this beautiful, this special occasion of ours. It's an honor to be here. It's just beautiful setting. The wall looks beautiful. So much hard work by Bob White, John, Paul, Rod, and all the volunteers that work so tedious and hard to present this to us. It's an honor for Wareham to have such a beautiful setting here. Through the efforts of public and private support, this was all made possible. We had a lot of fundraisers, and it helped fray the cost. God, you know, the major said almost everything about me. But anyway, when I first got to the gem school, I can remember being interviewed by Bob White, the veterans agent, or council of the veterans, and he said, "Steve, after 9.5 months, you mean to tell me you were selected to go up to the airborne school in Gablingen in Germany to become an instructor?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "That's hard to believe." I said, "Well, Bob, I was a good soldier." And that was out of a division of 10,000 men maybe. 20 of us went up, and they selected 10 of us. My first 17 months there, I roomed with Troy B. Williams. His name is on the wall. Troy was from Mount Hope, West Virginia, and he was in Charlie Company, 173rd. On the 8th of November, remember this, go to any jukebox and you can play 8th of November and you'll get the most beautiful song, sad but really great. And Operation Hump, they, out of a company, 47 of them got killed, and Troy happened to be one of them. He was a sharp soldier. And on that day also, the first living black, Lawrence Joel, he was a specialist second-class medic, and he received the Medal of Honor for his heroic and the duties that he performed after being wounded several times. He pulled guys out of the line of fire and administered first aid. Anyway, Lyndon B. Johnson awarded him the Congressional Medal of Honor. My wife and I went down and visited Troy's burial ground in Mount Hope, a beautiful setting overlooking the farmhouse that was once there. It burnt, and his brother Lewis was the principal of the Mount Hope High School, constructed this beautiful log cabin type home, and it's unbelievably beautiful. I've spoken to every one of his siblings, his two sisters in Mount Hope, Fort Worth, Texas. His brother Lewis, I mentioned. But anyway, he mentioned my airborne reunions. I've had the 10th of September will be my 17th reunion, and I've had some history there too. 8 years ago, I had 5 guys that jumped in on D-Day, 2 guys that went in on gliders on D-Day, and a C-47 pilot who flew the mission on D-Day. It's one hell of a nice time. Plenty of food, and but those guys are no longer with us. And like I always tell people, I guess we're all on the waiting list. But another thing I'd like to mention, let's keep Chad Santello in our prayers. He's in Afghanistan. His mom and dad are here today. Oh, Iraq, I'm sorry. But anyway, Chad, God bless you, and you'll be home soon. Again, thank you so much. And Major, thank you so much for the introduction.
Ladies and gentlemen, Stevie Baptiste, thank you, sir. It is now my pleasure to introduce a musical tribute in honor of those super soldiers of whom we sing these songs for and who we sing these songs to. This song is an original written by award-winning singer-songwriter Grace Morrison. Her professional career has included stints performing with some of the world's most well-known musicians, including Eddie Money from the J. Giles Band, Chris Slade of AC/DC, Craig Douglas of the Steve Miller Band, and so many, many more. Today, Grace performs her first studio album entitled I'm the Apple. at the Hotley Roads, Cranberry Bogs in Rochester, Massachusetts. Ladies and gentlemen, an apple in our eyes, Grace Morrison singing Taking Johnny Home.
Thank you. I'd just like to say something about the song. My uncle, Peter Morrison, was a lifelong Wareham resident and a Vietnam veteran. And I knew that my whole life, but I never really appreciated what that meant until he was in the hospital, and in his last month of life, he started telling me a little bit of his story. And I guess what I took from it is, what he said when he came home, he kissed the ground, but he never really felt like he came home. And I think that's true for so many of our veterans, and those of us who've never served can't fully appreciate the sacrifice that you've all made for us. So I thank you, and this is called Taking Johnny Home. Stole a doctor's purse of pills. His bank was richer than mine. They locked me up and said, "You've got a choice, boy. Your neck is mine." So we ride, we float to the highest hills and the lowest of lows, taking Johnny home to his house up in the mountains, taking Johnny home past the sycamore tree, taking Johnny home where his mama will be waiting, and she'll know it's the devil in me. They let us out in the warmest water with a jungle breeze. Children floating, they're falling in the dark Red Sea. So we walk, we reload to the highest hills and the lowest of lows, taking Johnny home to his house up in the mountains, taking Johnny home past the sycamore tree, taking Johnny home where his mama will be waiting. She'll know it's not Johnny. I'll kiss the ground, my lips touch the stone, but I know I'm never really coming home. Taking Johnny home to his house up in the mountains, taking Johnny home past the sycamore tree, taking Johnny home where his mama will be waiting. She'll know it's not Johnny. Taking Johnny home. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Grace Morrison singing Taking Johnny Home. So many tears in the audience. Well done, thank you. Our keynote speaker this afternoon is Brigadier General James LaFavor. He is the commander of the Massachusetts Air National Guard. He is the principal advisor to the Adjutant General in the administration, coordination, planning, development, and the execution of all Air National Guard and National Guard Joint Staff programs. He ensures the preparation of 8,200 airmen and soldiers of overseeing the Commonwealth's Joint Homeland Defense Program, to include rapid reaction forces, contingency emergency response forces, counter drug operations, civil support teams, expeditionary medical teams, and explosive ordnance disposal. General LaFavor graduated from the U.S. Air Force Academy in 1986, earning a Bachelor of Science in European History. Prior to his assignment to commander of the 102nd Intelligence Wing, he was the Vice Wing Commander. Prior to his assignment to the 102nd Fighter Wing, he was also an active duty F-15C pilot with operational tours at Bitterberg Air Base, West Germany, Katahdin Air Base in Japan, and Langley Air Force Base in Virginia. He has served in Operations Desert Fox, Southern Watch, and Noble Eagle. He is a highly decorated soldier whose major awards and decorations include the Global War on Terrorism Service Medal, Combat Readiness Medal, Air Force Meritorious Service Medal, Aerial Achievement Medal, and the Legion of Merit. Ladies and gentlemen, he is Commander of the Massachusetts Air National Guard. I bring to you Brigadier General James LaFavor.
Well, don't know who that guy is. Wow, what a great day. Thanks for turning out on this wonderful day. Folks who set up this organization, Bob White and gang, appreciate you inviting me here to do this and for doing all the prep work that's involved in setting up this great tribute. And again, thanks to the good people of Wareham for sponsoring this whole deal. It's truly an honor for me to be able to stand here and say a few words in front of this magnificent tribute to a very remarkable and influential war. This is my first time seeing the moving wall. And when I walked up here for the first time, I looked at it and I went, wow, that looks as big as the real one down in Washington, which I've seen a couple of times. And I know I read it's a half scale, but it certainly seems like it's a visual illusion. This thing is truly magnificent. And if you ever do get a chance to go down to the National Mall, it's well worth the trip to swing by and see the original. When this wall was unveiled in 1982 by President Reagan, I think it was Veterans Day of that year, so it was in the fall. I had just entered the Air Force that summer, so we basically have the same career lengths, the wall and me. I remember during that time period, this wasn't your normal monument. There was a lot of controversy about it and a lot of complaints. I remember the press was giving it a pretty bad rap, saying it was too different. It wasn't majestic enough. It wasn't like your, Washington Monument. It was, I think they even called it at one point the Black Rock in a Ditch, kind of like the last kick in the jimmies to our Vietnam vets. And I remember it was over and over again in the news, and where everyone was going, wow, is it really that bad? And when President Reagan unveiled it, all the Vietnam vets completely embraced it. They said, no, this is our memorial. It's the way we like it, and we actually love it. So it just goes to show you how much hot air the press has. But that how they loved it so much was that only 2 years after that, in '84, they made this, the moving wall, and I do believe there's 3 of them. How many other national monuments have a moving monument? None to my knowledge. That's just a testament to show you that, yes, our Vietnam vets have totally embraced this wonderful monument. And when you look at it, I personally like it too. It's totally unique. It is not like any of the others. It's just kind of like that war. That war was not like any of the others. Very somber and solemn and deep. But one thing that you'll notice, and you see it right now, and you'll see it at the wall in the National Mall, it's the most interactive of any monument I've ever seen. You don't see people going up and touching the Washington Monument or rubbing the Lincoln Monument like you see people doing here. This is very interactive. They can search and they can find the names, touch the names, and Down in Washington, the marble is so polished, you can see your exact reflection of your face in it as you're touching that name, so it becomes very personal. So I think it's absolutely a fitting and terrific monument, and it has been since 1982. So what can I say about Vietnam that hasn't already been said? And let me tell you, there's not much. When I sat down and think, well, what am I going to say today? I try to think, well, maybe I'll just put my own personal spin and maybe what Vietnam had taught me. So that's what I'm going to do. So yes, I was alive during Vietnam, as were quite a few of us, but I was just a wee lad. And I don't really have any firsthand experience with the war other than remembering hearing my folks talking about the war, the war, the war, the war. And to me, playing with Army men at the time, that seemed completely normal to me. The one memory that I do have sealed in my brain was my dad took me to this brand new movie that just came out. And we went to a drive-in movie theater, and the movie was The Green Berets with John Wayne. And I'll never forget that movie. And he said, you know, for at least a month afterwards, I'd be running around playing Green Berets, singing Fighting Soldiers from the Sky, and which I still do on occasion. So no firsthand experience. However, when I joined the Air Force in 1982, that was less than a decade from the last action we saw over there, I did have a lot of secondhand experience and interaction because a lot of my instructors and my flight instructors and my commanders and the people that I flew with, a whole lot of the older guys saw action in Vietnam. And so they would tell me and they would teach me stuff firsthand. So I kind of felt like I do have a little bit of experience because these guys imparted on me, you know, their knowledge. I do remember them saying back in Vietnam it was a very different Air Force. Okay, and that's kind of what I'm going to talk about, an air power perspective, because I'm Air Force. So since Vietnam, the time I joined and then started flying, the Air Force changed quite a bit. And when I sat back and thought about it, it's because of what we learned in Vietnam. Vietnam taught us a whole lot about how to fly planes better, period. And we did. And let me give you a couple examples. First of all, you know, from Vietnam up until Desert Storm, we had to rely on Vietnam as really the only major combat ops in the air that we had. So we were constantly going back and going, well, this is how we did in Vietnam, this is what we did, this is what we saw, this is what the enemies were like, and that's what we trained to. So as part of my growing up and learning how to fly, it was always relating back to what we did in Vietnam. And we learned some things. When we started that war, we weren't good in a lot of areas, okay? One of those areas was dogfighting, you know, close in, you know, aerial combat, one jet versus another. We were very good in World War II when we flew against the Germans and the Japanese, very good at dogfighting, pretty darn good in Korea with the F-86s and the MiG-15s. But somehow we kind of lost it with Vietnam. And how do we know that? Because our loss rate was going way up. We were losing more jets than we should be. What do I attribute that to? Well, it was probably a mindset. In between the wars of Korea and Vietnam, they came out with this thing called the air-to-air missile. Okay, and some people, probably some doofus generals, thought that the air-to-air missile was the end-all, be-all to aerial combat, and they actually thought that dogfighting was dead, that we would never have to do close-in maneuvering with another aircraft ever again. How do I know that also is our primary jet fighter at the time, the F-4 Phantom, they actually removed the internal gun, saying you'll never need this again with air-to-air missiles. Boy, were they wrong. So on day one, we learned the hard way, very hard way, that when you hit the pickle button, it is not 100% that a missile's gonna come off, okay? And if that missile comes off, it is not 100% that it's gonna guide to the target, okay? And if it gets to the target, it's not 100% that it's gonna destroy that target with one shot. And oh, by the way, they're not an endless supply. And we learned that the hard way, that no, we have to get in there close and do some dogfighting. It starts off with training, and we started to train. I read a book a few years ago. It was the autobiography from Robin Olds. And Robin Olds went from World War II up through Vietnam, and that's one of the things he would always try to train his guys on how to be better dogfighters. So it started with training. And then the Air Force kind of saw the big picture too. They realized that, I don't want to offend anyone here, but you know, the venerable McDonnell Douglas F-4 Phantom II was a truly great jet, but it was not a dogfighter. And you could ask any Rhino driver that was actually the case. When you put an F-4 up against a cheapo little MiG-21 that was well handled, the MiG would often would grease the F-4. And that's what we had to figure out. And the Air Force finally said, all right, well, we need to build a jet fighter that can dogfight. And what was being designed during Vietnam as a direct result was this plane called the McDonnell Douglas F-15 Eagle, which was highly maneuverable and a direct result of us needing to be better dogfighters. And a little bit later they came out with this one called the F-16, but yeah, it was mainly the F-15, and I'm not biased at all. So we started changing our tactics. We designed and developed better aircraft, were two great things to come out of Vietnam. The other one that happened was with training. We noticed that when we sent our new pilots into battle, they were getting killed or captured or shot down at a lot faster rate. And that's because of inexperience. Back in the States, we weren't giving them the right training. So again, I think guys like Robin Olds at the time came up with this outstanding idea that is still in effect today. It says, why don't we give our pilots a very complex exercise before they go into combat to try to simulate it, try to give them that goal of 10 combat missions under their belt. And so they developed this exercise called Red Flag. If you ever hear about it, it's conducted multiple times a year out in the desert of Nevada. And no kidding, Red Flag is, I've been to several of them in my life, and they are the biggest, most complex, most realistic exercise you can have without actually firing weapons. And when you have 50 to 70 aircraft on one side going against 50 to 70 aircraft on another side, you're going to learn something. You're going to learn something as a new lieutenant. And that was the goal that came out of the lesson learned from Vietnam is we got to train our guys better. So when you think about it from an air power perspective, the F-15 Eagle and Red Flag, that was just alone was a very successful learning point from Vietnam. But that wasn't everything that did. Like I said, we changed tactics a lot. We went into that war in this mindset of what was called a welded wing concept, which doesn't make any sense. But and we learned very fast that we needed to get far apart from each other so we can look around for enemy aircraft and for enemy surface-to-air missiles. The way we treated surface-to-air missiles changed dramatically. When we entered the war, we would kind of disregard them, and we lost a lot of aircraft to SAMs. So we got very good at avoiding them, learning how to defeat them when that missile was in flight, and then learning how to counterattack them with anti-radiation missiles. We also learned that the enemy doesn't really own the night. They don't really fly at night that much. And if we could just get very good at night, we would go up there uncontested. The British kind of knew that back in World War II with their bombing campaign, and flying at night was difficult. But from Vietnam all the way up through the late 80s, we practiced getting very good at flying night operations, a lot more so than any of our adversaries. Also dealing with the surface-to-air missile threat, we developed this other very important tactic, or not tactic, but technique called stealth. As everyone knows, that if you're not stealth these days, you're nothing. But that all came out of Vietnam. Tactics, night operations, and stealth. And did it work? Well, I'll tell you one thing. I think all of those things were proven on night one of Desert Storm and beyond. So when you think back on an air power perspective, this war, we learned a tremendous amount. And there was one more thing, too. When we entered that war, we naively went in there thinking that the country of Vietnam was going to abide by the ethics of the Geneva Convention. Boy, were we wrong. They beat and tortured our POWs to death out there. And at least the Air Force didn't really have our guys prepared as well. There was a pilot named Lance P. Saigon who got shot down, and his only training on how to combat being a POW was the old John Wayne approach of name, service number, date of birth, and anything else you can kiss my butt. And that's what he went in, and he was a stud, but they beat him to death. So the Air Force stood back and said, hey, we need to train our guys a little bit better on how to be able to combat these treatment by people that don't uphold the Geneva Convention. And so they developed, straight out of Vietnam, was called CERI, Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape Training, that to this day, every Air Force aircrew member has to go through. And it's a tough course, but it's there to simulate what it would be like as a POW and to give the aircrew some tools and techniques to combat the enemy without having to resort to getting beaten to death. Outstanding technique that came out of Vietnam. So another thing we learned, and this doesn't have anything to do with the military, but more philosophically, I think it was a national lesson. We treat our military returning from battle a whole lot better today than we did back then as a nation. When I look back, and I know it was a different type of war, but when I look back and I see examples and pictures and stories and hear at firsthand accounts from Vietnam vets of how poorly they were treated when they returned from battle and often blamed for the war, it astounds me. The reason it astounds me is because we don't see that at all in our nation today. At least I don't. At least I'm not privy to it. I think our nation has now really turned the corner in the right direction and they don't blame the soldier for the war that they disagree with. Okay, when we invaded Iraq, sure, a lot of people didn't think we should go in there and remove Saddam Hussein, but when the soldiers came back, they didn't blame the soldier anymore. And I think that's a huge learning point and a great thing that our country has changed to do so. And also, along with that, our Veterans Administration, although it's a work in progress, I know it's a work in progress, I think it's continuously improving to be able to do that. So there's two things we're very thankful that has changed since then. So during the 13 years of this war, as you heard, about 9 million men and women served in our military, and about 3 million served overseas in Vietnam. And here's a stat that I did not know until recently. 2/3 of those 3 million people were volunteers. We had always heard about the draft being such a big thing. I figured many people were involuntarily sent there, but no. 2/3 of those 3 million were red, white, and blue-blooded American volunteers, and that says a lot. So to all the veterans of that war, and certainly to all the names on this wall, you are truly American heroes. This country owes you a debt of gratitude for the risks you took and the sacrifices you made, not only for your own personal safety, but to that of your family, your comrades in arms, and the sacrifices you've made to this great nation. Thank you for your service, and hope you have a wonderful afternoon.
You heard the general talk about lessons learned. We can apply one of the greatest lessons that he talked about is that we, moving forward, would always have an attitude, an absolute attitude. And that is, we would always have an absolute attitude of gratitude for soldiers moving forward. So let's demonstrate that right now, and let's give a round of applause and an attitude of gratitude for Brigadier General James LaFavor. Thank you, sir. And to demonstrate that attitude of gratitude that we have, we would like to recognize Brigadier General James LaFavor with a plaque that says, "Never forget," in recognition of and appreciation for your participation in the Vietnam Veterans Moving Wall Ceremony. Presented to Brigadier General James LaFavor, Commander, Massachusetts Air National Guard, August 2017, Wareham, Massachusetts. We must never forget. Sir.
Appreciate it. Thanks very much.
Thank you, brother. Also joining Brigadier General James LaFavor, he has his wonderful wife, Jennifer, here in the audience, and his son, Tom. Jennifer and Tom, you want to wave so we can wave back at you? And I understand it's your birthday, Tom? Happy birthday, brother. Happy birthday. All right, at this time, we also want to recognize our special guests that are with us. We thank you again for the Board of Selectmen, Alan Slavin here with us, sir. Thank you very much. And we would like to call Steve Ruiz from WCTV to give us some further tokens of appreciation. Steve?
All right, good afternoon. Whoa, that's loud. 58,315 and 15 names. If you've walked by the wall this week, you've heard those names being spoken as you went. And just want to let you know that the actual recording of that was a project of the Hyannis Veteran Center in cooperation with Wareham Community Television. So what we did was we didn't rip the books in half, we just bought more books. But they took the first half of the book, we took the second half of the book, and they just wanted to get involved. You know, so it's there's just regular folks out there that volunteered that wanted to read the names. And if any of them are here, thank you for doing it. I put the project on two of my summer crew. One's over there, Mia, and Michaela's in the back, and she probably won't come out. But I gave them the project about 2 months ago, and I said, this is it, this is our deadline. And it was interesting watching them scramble to get names and get people, and people just coming forward. You know, we just said, would you like to help us with the project? And they did. So what you're listening to as you go through there are just volunteers that just spoke the names, and out of love, out of respect. And so I just wanted to mention that because it was pretty cool. And again, if you're from the Hyannis Veteran Center, thank you. And that's it. Thank you.
I think you'll agree with me that it takes a village to raise a child. We've heard that saying before, right? It takes a village to raise a child. Well, it too took a village to raise this wall. And to raise the wall, it took countless hours of support from the village, from the parking attendants to the sound men, to the 24-hour security, from the motorcycle escorts, and to the young adults escorting many to the wall, and to the many, many, many ways that other people served. On behalf of the Wareham Veterans Committee and Friends of Wareham, please, let's give a big round of applause to all those who donated their time, their talent, and their treasure. Thank you so much. Also, a reminder at 1400 hours, everybody's looking at their clock saying, what does that mean? Okay, at 2 o'clock, civilian time, we will have a Elks ceremony. We have Mr. Bob Hurley here if you have any questions about it, but they are going to be having a wreath ceremony, very powerful, very moving, and they will also be going over some further history of the moving wall. Please take the time to attend that at 1400. And again, any questions, Mr. Hurley, raise your hand so that they can just see you if need be. All right, thank you. At this time, we're going to have a musical tribute by Grace Morrison singing God Bless America.
I don't know about you, but this has me a little emotional, so I was hoping you could all sing it with me. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with a light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans wide with foam. God bless
In closing, all Vietnam vets, remember the words of President JFK. John Fitzgerald Kennedy said this to the nation: ask not what your country can do for you, but for what you can do for your country. Those standing before us and those names standing tall on the wall proudly, humbly, and solemnly represent the doers of our country. To honor our doers, I will name the branch of the armed service, and if you ever served, please, please stand and remain standing. Men and women of the Coast Guard, please stand. Men and women of the U.S. Navy, please stand. Mighty men and women of the U.S. Army Marine Corps, please stand. Mighty men and wonderful women of the U.S. Army, please stand. Also, can the parents of Staff Sergeant Richard Fitz please stand? And MIA family. Ladies and gentlemen, our super soldiers and wonderful warriors, in honor of the names on the moving wall, men and women that exemplify the quote. And don't forget, men and women of the Air Force, please stand. They exemplify the famous quote, all gave some and some gave all. Now let us all stand as family, and we will hear the benediction by Chaplain Colonel Larry Bazer. In conclusion, we will then retrieve the colors, followed by the rifle salute and the playing of taps by Frank Noonan.
Please freely join me in prayer or personal thought if you wish. Our ever-loving protector, bless all who are gathered here this day. Shield and protect them. May the names and memories recalled here on this sacred wall inspire us for hope, love, and peace. God bless this wall. God bless Wareham and surrounding communities who made this wall today possible. God bless the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. God bless the United States of America. Amen.
And now the retrieving of the colors, followed by the 21 salute and playing of taps. Retrieving of the colors, move. Ladies and gentlemen, with an attitude of gratitude, this concludes today's ceremony of the moving wall. We will never forget.